Well, welcome back to Always a Bigger Fish, a Star Wars podcast, asking the questions you didn't think to... no, answering the questions you didn't think to ask. Ha. I remember how this show goes. We are talking today about everybody's favorite hot button topic, the Acolyte. This, of course, the 2024 Star Wars TV show. Generously, I would say reactions have been mixed to this. Is that... How would you describe the Star Wars fan base kind of general attitude toward the show?
I would say mixed would be a fairly generous interpretation.
That's very generous.
Yeah, people hate this show. They hate it. They hate it.
Or
They
at least
it.
towards the beginning. At the end of it, more people were like, "Oh, this got good towards the end." But yeah, at the beginning, like pretty much everyone hated it.
Okay. Well, what about you guys? Well, we'll get into the details and we'll get into a few topics here. But before we do the summary, what was each of y'all's
High level?
general? Yeah, high level.
Darth?
I am very not picky when it comes to certain things, and mixing Kung Fu and Star Wars is one of the things that I was always going to love, no matter how terrible it was. I guess as long as the martial arts were good, and the martial arts were fairly decent. So I enjoyed it just for like that visual aspect. Like I'll rewatch this just for the fight scenes, and always enjoy it. I will not argue the story was good. I understand where they were going, and with a few alterations, it could have been much, much, much better. But I love talking about it because there's so many things that open up more backstory and could have this is backstory for what we see in the future, and that is one of the most interesting parts of this story to me, is that we are seeing the world before Yoda. We are seeing the time before the Jedi are in the state where they are able to be corrupted by the Senate and take over as war generals and all of that. So this time frame is very unique, and it's fascinating to look at what could have happened, which is one thing I love about film analysis is, this was bad, and why was it bad? How can we fix it? And there's so much potential for how great it could have been. Even though it was very, very difficult to watch at times.
Right. What about you?
All right. So, as you guys know, it took me a number of attempts to get into the show. I actually gave up on it completely until you guys were like, all right, let's talk about it. And I was like, I want to talk about it too. So then I sat down and I made myself watch it. And I will say that after I got through the first couple episodes, I still didn't care, but it was a lot easier to watch. It definitely picked up in the midway, but at the end of the day, I still very much agree with the blurb that you gave it, which was that it was aggressively mid. Yeah, I think that's a perfect summary of this. Like to piggyback on what Darth said, it could have been a lot better. I don't understand where all the money that went into this show went. But yeah, aggressively mid.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting. This show, to me, I think it's trying to do too many things at once, and it doesn't end up being one thing or another thing, right? I think that's like my biggest general criticism is it's trying to be this self-serious mystery, but it's also trying to be this kind of a little bit tongue-in-cheek, like young adult fantasy story, but then all of the elements for that don't start until like halfway through, so then it doesn't really feel like that connects to what came before it, and then all the interesting stuff is at the back end because it's all related to the YA story, and it just ends up being kind of a mess. And yeah, it's interesting how much money went into this, and I think especially given how much of this was shot on location, how fake it feels sometimes is absolutely bizarre to me. Yeah.
Can I make one other point? I don't want anybody to misunderstand where at least I was coming from on this, and that this was the of all the announced shows that they did several years ago. I think before even Book of Boba Fett came out. They had Kathleen Kennedy announced a whole bunch of shows, many of which have been canceled and never came around. But she announced, including like Andor and this one, those were the two that I was most interested in. Andor because it was going to be a Gilroy joint, and I was like, in his hands, I think we could get something amazing, and
yep.
I maintained that we did. And then there was this one, which I was also very interested in, not just because, as Darth said, it's a brand new time period, which I really think they should, if they're going to take away anything from the negativity of this, it shouldn't be that we don't want to see this, we don't want to see stories away from the mainline Star Wars, because I think we do. Or at least I do.
Yeah.
So I was very interested in the new timeline, and I was also the director. Name escapes me at the moment, but I've seen her other stuff, and I liked it. So I was interested in the story that she could potentially tell.
Yeah.
So I did not come in here with like preconceived notions of like it's going to be a woke piece of crap, and I was very much looking forward to it, and I was disappointed.
Yeah. Leslie Headland.
Which is interesting because
for those playing along at home.
Yeah, Leslie. Yeah. Like, how did she get this? I am so curious about that, because like her other stuff, like she had like one sort of acclaimed show. I don't remember what it was.
So she,
but nothing else.
Yeah, she's an interesting director. So her kind of big break was Russian Doll for Netflix, but kind of her sleeper hit was Sleeping with Other People, which is one of those films that it's Alison Brie, Jason Sudeikis, Adam Scott in an era before all of them were famous. Jason Mantzoukas as well. It was one of those shows, or one of those films, beg your pardon, that was trying to be in the vein of like kind of Community, if you will, where it's funny, but it sort of also reaches for a lot of that emotional work as well. And by the time you get to Russian Doll, that is a show that is it's not supernatural exactly, but it is sci-fi in that this character keeps dying and has to figure out why they keep dying and sort of learn a lesson or come to some kind of conclusion about it. And then I think
it's Groundhog Day.
It's Groundhog Day, but
but dying.
And it's really good. And then ends up getting this gig off the back of that, being so successful. So that's kind of how she ends up here. Yeah. Sorry, that was to answer your question, Darth. That's how she got here.
I guess my question is more of why, and maybe this is like biased, but I'm like, why would you put someone in charge of a part of a franchise when they are not a fan of that franchise? Maybe that's just not how Hollywood thinks. But like from what I read, like they had to go and actually like they had to watch Star Wars, because like they didn't know the movies in order to write this. And that just seems so backwards to me to, say, hey, I think you could do this, even though you know nothing about it. And it's like, why would you even say, yeah, I think I can do this? I know nothing about it. So of course I think I could write these, write something in this world that I have no knowledge about. Like the whole thing just seems so backwards to me.
All right, do you want to make the Gilroy
where
point?
you have yeah, well, I was going to say, I think you run into a problem there where, like, to give a specific example from this show, like, the whole force and attachments thing, that how they keep bringing that up, like, it that part goes to like what Darth is saying there, where, like, that whole scene felt like somebody had, like, it was written by somebody who had, like, just watched Star Wars and goes, oh, okay, I think I get it. Like, yeah, like the what's the word I'm looking for? The hyper focus on attachments that they had in this show it really bothers me. Like, I keep like that whole part. I'm like, that's not how the Force works. Like, I understand that Yoda was talking about attachments and stuff like that, but it's selfishness is the problem when it comes to attachments, not necessarily love. If that makes sense.
Right, but
Like, that's a whole. We could have a whole show.
That's
on just that.
that's a whole other because then you and I end up disagreeing fundamentally about like why Yoda's wrong about attachment and like the mechanistic thing that Yoda does to the Jedi that changes how they perceive attachment. Like, but yeah, sorry, go on. That's a whole other show.
No. What I was saying is like that part. So that part happens in the very first episode, which might be why I had such a tough time getting past the first episode, because I was like, all right, this doesn't seem like it was written by somebody who understands Star Wars.
Yes. But do you think that, like, because the Gilroy argument, Darth, is that Tony Gilroy hates Star Wars and he made the best Star Wars, which is Andor, right? And the reason he was able to do that is he didn't come in with preconceived notions of what it could be, and he forced him and his writers to take the world very, very seriously, right? Andor is full of people staring at those New Hope ass screens and pretending to read data off these inscrutable like shapes moving around and stuff. And like it's doofy, but because it's taken seriously, it's able to land its punches really well. And I think at times I agree with both of you. There's some of the Star Wars stuff in this feels like Cliff Notes Star Wars, which is exactly what you get from a Wikipedia instead of the conversations we end up having, which is me going, well, that's fucking stupid. Why would Star Wars do that? And then you guys have really compelling things to pull on and bring to the conversation. It feels like they didn't necessarily have someone at all times doing that. But occasionally this show does feel like it gets it right, in my opinion.
I think to try to give Darth a concise answer on this, or where I was trying to get to is that I don't think there's it's a problem at all for Lucasfilm or whatever to go out and go, like, you could get Spielberg or Scorsese or any number of like great directors out there, like Christopher Nolan or somebody like that.
I want to see Wes Anderson so bad. Wes Anderson.
Yeah, a Wes Anderson Star Wars would be ridiculous, but it would be good. But I think as long as they have. I think the problem with, our general problem with somebody like Johnson or Headland in this case is when they try to dig into the lore or the real deep background of Star Wars, and I think that's where you run into trouble. Like trying to say something about the Force instead of just like it's there and. Or it's there and it's a thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Am I making sense?
Yeah, but then I have the same issue with Dave Filoni, where when he gets into it in Clone Wars and in Rebels, it annoys the shit out of me because it feels like fan fiction, where it's like, get your head out of your ass and focus back on the story. Like, why are we going to this planet with these like weird Force gods and shit? Why are we in a void? Sunny in a Void is like the most frustrating episode. Like. I have the opposite issue, which is when someone who knows this stuff really well does it, it also irritates me. I feel like the trick is to go, this is exactly what you're saying. This is how it is, and we're gonna kind of squint at how it works and focus on what it can do for our story, not dig into the underlying mechanisms of it.
It's the midichlorian thing.
Yes,
you know,
exactly.
People lost their shit with the midichlorian thing.
Yeah,
and that's the trying to give you a better or deeper, more insight into how the Force works. And like, no, we don't want that.
We didn't need to know. Oh, no. Also, metachlorians make their way into the show. We get an end count reference at one point. Okay, Rye, can you hit refresh because I just fixed a typo in the summary. Let's do the summary so we've at least laid it out for people that have chosen not to watch it or have completely forgotten the plot. With the disclaimer that I wrote this very quickly while I was drunk last night at like midnight. So, we'll see how judgmental this summary is, I guess.
Am I reading the whole thing?
Yeah, we may as well do the whole thing because I can't imagine we'll want to go point by point through the show.
So, 100 years before Anakin heard of the Diatham, commonly mistaken for angels, we follow the story of twins Osha, an ex-Jedi, and somebody else.
And May?
And May. Yeah.
And May.
And there's no rest of that sentence.
I promise
Osha
it gets better.
Osha is arrested for the murder of a Jedi Knight, protests her innocence, and sways her old Jedi Master Soul, who is aware that Osha has a twin. May, not dead after all, pursues and kills a number of Jedi, all connected to an incident on the twins' home planet, Brendok.
Think it's Brendok.
We'll go with Brendok. Her contact, a mysterious young man, reminds her that her objective is to kill a Jedi without a weapon. Soul and the world's gormless cops show up and absolutely botch a capture operation. Not only does Osha get away, she convinces Master Torben to take his own life out of guilt. Talk about girl boss gaslight. in the then, Osha and May are the promised leaders of their witch. Like, I'm guessing you're trying to say in a flashback, I guess.
Yeah, that is
Osha
a
and
deep
May.
cut for Daredevil and the Detail Heads. In the then is a very common phrase we use on that show.
Okay. In the then, Osha and May are the promised leaders of their witch coven. Their mother, Anastasia, insists the girls have no father. On the eve of their ascension, Jedi interrupt and demand to test the twins' potential as Jedi. Drama occurs, wherein May throws the test, and Osha passes. The divide between the twins incites May to set a fire that destroys the temple, vanquishing their past and future. Nothing happens for an episode until the very end. Master Kelnaka has gone full Yoda. He's in a forest. He's getting weird about it. The Jedi cop squad descend on May's location. Kelnaka's green screen forest retreat. It's a real place in Madeira that looks fake on film. In the dark of the forest, a cloak figure with a head rendered from the bronze skull of a lesser nightmare appears. This creature, wielding a red lightsaber, slays every Jedi save Yord, Jeki, and Sol, but is revealed to be a man, a sexy, muscular young man. Some absolute nonsense happens, resulting in May and Osha switching places. So now May is with Sol heading back to Coruscant, and Osha is a prisoner of the evil Jedi Hot Man. On an island with a neat tide gimmick, Osha wakes and follows Kimir across the beach. In a charged scene, holds Kimir's weapon as he trips naked and bathes.
That should be strips.
Oh,
naked,
strips.
I imagine.
Strips naked. Trips the light fantastic.
There's no period after that sentence either. This is getting grim.
Sol figures out the parent trap has occurred and stuns, then binds May, tells her what really happened all those years ago when Sol and his team changed the twins' lives forever. This is made possible by an indecipherable sentient badger alien that we've excised until now, because if you don't pay attention to this little freak, the story doesn't make sense. In the then, on Brendok, the four Jedi, Sol and his crew back then, are investigating the potential of a vergence in the Force when Sol comes upon May and Osha doing the Force as children. A bunch of bullshit happens and there's fighting between the Jedi and the witches, and Sol has to choose between saving Osha and May, and chooses Osha because she wanted to be a Jedi. Sol and May head back to Brendok and May escapes. Why not? Kimir and Osha flirt and head back to Brendok also. At the hallowed ground where the witch's coven was destroyed by the Jedi, Sol defeats Kimir. Osha, with no one stopping her, confronts Sol and force chokes him to death. Wikipedia describes the deeply tragic and haunting decision by May to lose any concept she ever had as a sister as Kimir uses the Force to wipe May's memory. Back on Coruscant, politics have been kinda happening, but it's one guy, so I didn't include it. Osha and Kimir stand on the waterfront, united by passion, ready to take on what's next. And that is the end of the show and the series.
And the summary.
Because season 2 is not happening.
No. Now, this was interesting, not only because of my inebriated state putting this together, but also no one has written a coherent plot summary for this show anywhere on the internet. Normally what happens is I go to Wikipedia and I go, this is, I look up the show and then I go, okay, what stuff have they included here? What stuff have they excised? How do I want to frame our summary for the purposes of our conversation? How am I going to write mine in opposition to this existing plot description? There is no existing plot description. On Wikipedia, it has a premise, which is like 4 sentences. Wikipedia has no plot summary. I don't know what that means. No one's writing about this show. Not sure what to make of that. I might put our summary on Wikipedia. I'm not sure what that suggests, but do with that what you will, dear listener.
Well,
that would be
that
so
right there
full
is why the
circle
show.
for you.
That's right there is why there's no season 2.
Because no one's writing about
Just
it.
because the show didn't land. It nobody watched it.
Was there anything that I didn't include in that summary that's worth mentioning before we get into some topics?
I think you forgot the part where Soul kills the mom.
I did. Well, because again,
It's kind of an important moment.
Yeah, I skipped all the death.
I skipped all the death. I've PG'd it up. You can't say nothing no more. PC police gone mad. So the kind of inciting incident of the whole thing is that Sol's team are on this planet searching for virgins. He comes upon these girls, follows them back to their temple, discovers there's this coven of Force witches, and as a bunch of bullshit happens with the young Padawan that's there, but they all end up converging on the temple on the night where these girls are supposed to ascend, and Sol, in the middle of this scuffle, in order to stop the twins' mother, one of their mothers, from doing something, we don't know what, she's sort of force apparating away, he ignites his lightsaber, killing her, and as it happens, you can see he's regretting what he's done. May sees this. Osha does not see this. Osha is currently, I think, locked in the bedroom at this point, potentially. But the crucial detail here is that May sees this and Osha doesn't. And this is fundamentally the divide between them, is the knowledge they have of this act that Sol has committed. And what we, of course, learn later is that May goes on to become Sol's apprentice and functionally his surrogate daughter, right? So this is kind of like a crucial detail that he killed...
Osha. Osha's the apprentice?
What
right?
did I just say?
May is the bad one?
God damn it. Yeah. Osha. So Osha becomes Sol's apprentice. And that's why toward the end, it's such a fundamental betrayal, because Sol kills Osha's mother. The twins don't have a father. Sol becomes Osha's father, and then later learns that this was only possible because Sol killed her mother, and this is kind of the last straw that sort of that allows her to access the dark side and to finally choke Sol to death.
But what was the first straw?
The first straw, I don't remember, because she quit the Jedi Order for some reason that I can't remember.
So one of the things I really wanted to talk about the killing of the mom, Anastasia, yeah. This is the sort of it's kind of the same thing. Do you remember what I was talking about in the video about The Last Jedi, where Luke's big mistake?
Yeah.
Is with it's like because we have to we still have to like him, Luke. He can't really try to kill Kylo.
No,
so it has to be a
fake out.
So it has to be the rom-com misunderstanding of where, he draws the lightsaber and then he's like, oh shit, this is a bad idea. But then Kylo wakes up and Kylo's like, fuck, this guy's gonna kill me. Because perception is reality, so that's his truth, is that Luke tried to kill him. So it's May's truth that Sol killed their mom. And I suppose it's factually correct that he did kill their mom, but he didn't mean to. And then the other thing was, what was she doing? She was. It was in the middle of this tense moment, she turns into the smoke monster from Lost. What is he supposed to do?
Yeah, it's like self-defense, right, to a certain extent.
Yeah. So it's the crux of the crux or the big or in our text notes, I don't remember what did I call it, the original sin or whatever.
Yeah.
The thing that they did wrong, which is what we've been waiting to find out for the whole season, is that he accidentally kills the mom.
I don't think that's only it, though. I think it's the fact that they intervene at all. It's the fact that he sees Osha once and he forms this attachment to her. And this, I think, goes back to what you guys were saying earlier about the show kind of having these one-note Star Wars things where his original sin is his attachment to Osha that leads to this actual climactic sin, which is him killing the mother, right? That wouldn't have happened if he hadn't been there at all, if he hadn't had that attachment and insisted on going back for her, right?
You could almost argue that away with there's a whole lot of the Force called to me, and I knew I was supposed to pick up this rock. I knew I was supposed to go through that door because the Force led me. So, based on what we were seeing, it almost felt like, the Force is telling him, this is your Padawan. So
Right.
you could definitely read it that way. But something I thought was really interesting that I just noticed was that there is like a solid theme of these problems happening because the main characters don't trust that the mothers have the best intent for their children. So it starts off with them thinking the moms are going to like sacrifice their kids or something in this ceremony, and then this time Saul thinks like it doesn't look like she's coming after him, because if I remember right, she turns into smoke and the smoke starts going towards May, and I think the idea was that she was going to teleport May over to Osha so she could save Osha from the fire. That logically is what should have been happening, because May says there's a fire, we need to help her, and then the mom turns into smoke. So I'm like, it's got to be she's going to help save the other kid, and she was going to take the other kid with her.
No, no. So what happens is Sol tells May to run, and then the mother is about to teleport over to stop her from running. Because Sol has figured out that the children are the valuable thing here, and he has figured out exactly what you're saying, which is they're going to sacrifice them in some capacity. And so he's trying to separate the children from the coven because he knows that they're the valuable thing, right?
Right. Do you have any memory of that scene?
I don't remember. I don't remember anything about them being sacrificed.
It's implied.
I do. One of the issues that I had with the whole, going back to one of my big things, which is the why, is that you have the witches that need these kids for some reason. They are their future or something like that. That they're supposed to be I took that to mean like they were supposed to be the future leaders or whatever. But you have May that is all about it, and then Osha who's like, no, I want to go be a Jedi. And which to me, I thought there was one of the. Going back to some of the high level questions that we were talking about before, like one of my things was, what is the theme or the question, or what is the show trying to say about stuff? And I thought like maybe there was like a choice thing going on, because like you have Anastasia is like or Osha's like, I want to go be a Jedi, and Anastasia's like, that sounds cool, like you can go do that. And then the other mom is like, no, we're going to keep these kids for whatever reason, nefarious or not, that we have. Did any of that make sense?
Yeah. I guess to Darth's point that he was making before, the thing that I can't escape is like, it has to be a nefarious purpose, because if it's not, the show doesn't make sense, right? Like, and you do get that moment where they're back at the camp and it's the Jedi talking to each other, and Trinity's like, yeah, like how could these children lead the coven? Like something is going on here, but it's not our business, right? And she plants the seed in Sol's head that like this is gonna break bad in some type of way. Like this isn't gonna end well for these girls, right? And whether that's like an assumption that is being made by the Jedi, and whether that's true or not, I think the story deems that to be true. Like, or the story behaves as if this ascension is going to be bad for the twins. Is, I guess, that's my read on it. Because we're seeing this flashbacks from Sol's perspective to a degree.
But the first time we see it is from their perspective. May and Osha. Right?
See what?
The first time we see the quote-unquote ascension, it's from Osha and May's perspective.
Oh yeah, first time or otherwise, I'm talking about like when we get the information that, hey, like this could be a bad thing. Like I don't know. There's just no version of this story, I think, where like we're to take the ascension as good for the girls. Unless I'm just completely wrong, which is possible.
Well, part of that is coming from the reaction of Osha during the ceremony, because she looks extremely apprehensive, and you could tell that she does not want to do it. And so some part of you is thinking like, is this gonna, like tear her soul from her or something like that when this happens? So that may be where that's coming from, and why, Rye is saying I didn't see that at all. It's like, I don't know that it's anywhere aside from just her reaction of not wanting to do it. And then you would think, why doesn't she want to do it? Because this is like your growing up ceremony. Like, this is in a ton of cultures, so the only reason you wouldn't want to do it is if it's going to hurt you.
Well, no. So I didn't read it that way. I read it as a commitment. So like, because their whole thing is like, they're the future of the coven or something like that, and I take it like this is their ascension ceremony is like, it's sort of like your confirmation as a Catholic, or your first communion, or whatever. Like, you're making some commitment to this thing by going through with this ceremony, is how I read it.
Yes.
And May does it, and she gets some sort of tattoo or emblem or something on her.
Mm-hmm.
But Osha wants to be a Jedi, and she's already, I think, that offer has already been on the table at that point, right?
Yeah.
Or no?
No, because they interrupt the ceremony
Yeah, they
right
interrupt
before
it.
that happens, so she doesn't get her mark.
Okay.
The thing that I can't get away from is like, these are manufactured children. Like, they've made them through this Virgins in the Force, right? So like, there must be a reason why they want them to, like, this. It's different this time because of this Virgins thing, right?
But see, that's where I go back to. I got the feeling of this is something to do with choice, because they created these children for a purpose, and they created these children for a purpose. They want these children to do something, and then but ignoring the fact that they're people and they may not want to do that thing, right? So so Osha accepts whatever it is that they want her or them to do, and May doesn't. Or no, sorry, other way around.
I think the reason there is maybe a little bit more obvious than we gave it credit for. That it says at some point in there that there are no children here. In a couple different ways they say that sentence, and I think the point of these kids are the future of us is because it's a group of women and they literally can't have kids. So when they get old and die, their entire coven is just gone, because there will never be any children. But if they can make children through the Force, then their bloodline will not die. So these kids are the future of their coven because it represents a new life cycle that they didn't have before these kids.
Yes, that is like objectively true. Yes, I agree with that. Yeah, but then I think this is where the story in my mind could be more like what we're doing now is we're going, hang on, what happened, right? Or like, what was implied to happen, versus going, hey, look at all these interesting implications and the readings and the impacts they have on the story. Like, I think there's a sort of there's a lack of immediacy to a lot of these themes, or they don't manage to end up saying a lot about the story that they're in a way that then puts them in interesting conversations with each other. So instead, they kind of feel like things that we're not quite sure of. And I usually think that's a sign that the story isn't landing its punches. When we've talked about stuff like this in the past, right? It's yeah.
Was that again? That was the whole. Some of the where you and I had like the same questions of, what was this about? What was it trying to say? Like, is this? And then the other thing I said, like, is this a story at all?
Yeah, I want to talk about that because we've already kind of dipped into the flashback a little bit and the kind of mystery mechanism. But for those who didn't watch it, basically across the length of the show, this flashback stuff we're talking about kind of occurs in different. You get different flashbacks at different times, revealing different parts of the truth of what happened until the final episode where it's revealed that Sol killed their mother. But like, the story of this show is a lot of people going back and forth between a couple of locations, a parent trap situation, and then 2 episodes at the end, the story actually happens. Very odd. Yeah, say more about that, right? Because I know that was the big thing that you wanted to talk about. Do you want to frame it up?
I keep the sorry. I was momentarily distracted thinking about episode 5 and how good it was.
Yeah.
And part of that is it's the Rodriguez episode, because like the action was just. I feel like episode 5 is where everything that should have happened in the story did. Like there was is Jackie is the apprentice, is the Padawan, right?
Yes.
Okay. You have Jackie and the other guy with the hair. I don't remember his name.
With the hair? What?
It's the other guy with the hair.
You gotta give me more than that.
The
The guy that
shirtless
arrests
guy.
her at the beginning. The shirtless guy that arrests her at the beginning.
The shirtless guy that... You mean the sexy
Well,
Sith?
not
George.
No.
Gorge.
Yord.
Yord.
Yord. That's right.
Yord
See,
is
you don't even remember his name.
Yord's the sexy Jedi, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, like when they were fighting, I was you have like nameless Jedi getting killed, and I'm like, okay, we've seen that. I've seen that a million times in like TV and movies and stuff like that, where you have you go out, you show up there with a big posse for most of them to get killed, but everybody else has like all the named characters. Like, oh, they're not a named character. They don't, they didn't have the plot arm and everything. And then Yord gets smoked, and then there was another moment where I was like. I think I didn't really like Jackie at the beginning, but she had a couple scenes and moments where she grew on me, she became a character that I liked, because she actually became a character or whatever, with like thoughts and motivations and things, and then during the fight I was like, I really feel like she should die at this moment. Like that would give this scene a ton of weight if that happened, and then it did, which I was very impressed with. So I like that's what I mean by like I felt not only was the action really good, talking about with what Darth was talking about, like with the kung fu and stuff, but like what happened or who died and everything like that, like was I think just really perfect in that episode.
They're characters that would survive in most shows because they're sort of like to an
in
extent
a weaker show.
Yeah, in a weaker show, right? To an extent, Yord is like the comedic relief because he's like the gormless fuckwit, and then Jackie is like the potential love interest for Osha a little bit, where they're sort of floating at the start, and it's like, oh no, they're both dead now. They just got aced. They're dead. Yeah, that to me works really well.
So that felt like one of the things that made Game of Thrones really good was that you had, after season 1, you definitely had the feeling that nobody was really safe, or no character was absolutely safe. Like at any moment, it's like unfortunately they set it up too many times for some characters, but it's like. Like this guy, it's plausible this guy could die here. It could happen. And they did that with the show, where you had 2 named characters who had scenes and a little bit of development and everything, and they just got whacked. And I think that took it to, like, if they hadn't done that, I think that this show would have been a complete disappointment for me.
Right. It's a show about killing Jedi.
Can you go back to your other question so I can think about that while you and Darth discuss episode 5?
Well, I mean, the question was largely the point you'd made about, like, is this even a story? In relation to the way that it becomes, like, a YA story in the last couple episodes, but, like, broadly across the thing, like, is it even a story? That was kind of the big thread.
Give me a minute to think about that.
Yeah. Darth, you're a Star Wars lightsaber buff nerd guy. You done the fighting yourself. You're sort of the expert when it comes to lightsabers. Is the fighting good in episode 5? Give me the Darth view.
Oh heck yeah! Now I don't know how to have done it better, but when the first couple Jedi hit his, I don't think it was his helmet, I think it was his shoulder pads or something, and their lightsabers shorted out, and I was like, can I rewind it? What just happened? Like I didn't physically understand the motions, and it took multiple times. I don't even know if it was until like the later fight when like Jackie was fighting him that I finally understood. Oh, his helmet is and his body armor is cortosis, and that's what's doing it. So it would be interesting to see like what could the if other people had that same reaction, then obviously there's something about the choreography. Like how do you hit someone with a laser and show that the laser turned off? I mean, yeah, they stopped and they looked at their laser, but I legitimately thought that he had either used the force to turn them off or that their lightsabers just broke, because there wasn't that connection to me that it was hitting the thing that caused them to turn off, which was really interesting.
See,
but another point
that works for me though, because you don't figure it out till Yord figures it out, and by then it's too late. Like,
yeah, that could be, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, as the fight was going, I was like, what the fuck is happening? And then by the time he figures it out, I'm like, no, Yord! And then he gets aced. But I understand your point. Sorry, go on.
One of the weirder things about that fight, though, is that maybe it's not until the later fight, but someone talks about how he will get inside your head, just like the witches did. Like, that line, like, really stuck in my brain. And at that point, I thought that this bad guy was the younger kid that had his mind taken over by the witches when they were there, and he had gotten like brainwashed in that moment.
The Padawan, yeah.
But turns out they don't tie anything together like that. But what was so weird about that is that later on, when Osha is with Khmer, you find out that is a sensory deprivation helmet, and when you put it on, all you have is your connection with the Force, letting you sense what else is out there. But if the helmet is on, no one can use the Force to sense him.
Yeah.
So when it was on, Vernestra didn't know he was alive, which is why he kept it on. But the Force could get out of the helmet, but it couldn't get into the helmet.
Mm-hmm.
Because he could use it to get inside their minds, but they couldn't use their minds to get inside his because the helmet was on. And that doesn't make sense. That really annoyed me. Like,
you're like,
what kind of metal is unidirectional with the Force? Like,
yeah, it's got an A circuit, but not a B circuit.
Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, what's the metal called? Cortosis. Because that's been in the EU for a while. It's obviously in the Knights of the Old Republic game. You know, that metal's been around and has been known to be like, you know, a repellent for lightsabers for some time. The use of it as like a Force isolation helmet, I think, is really interesting. Your point about him not being able to be sensed, I think, is fucking cool, because that's the thing that starts to freak out the Jedi, because they can't use all the mechanisms they normally would, and he's also just scary looking, right? And so it's that kind of like, they're just not prepared for this at all. I almost just wanted like a one-sentence wave-away explanation for why it was only one way. Like, I would have been fine with some bullshit if they'd been like, oh, you know, unless you train for years to learn to sense it, you know, it'll go unnoticed by most Force users or whatever, or like, unless you're a powerful blah blah blah. You know, like, the explanation could have been, it's not that it's only one way, it's that it takes so long to train with this thing to be able to see out of it, that it would also take so long to train to be able to see into it. And then in the middle of a battle,
I was gonna say that's exactly it, because it's the primary thing is it's a sensory deprivation, right?
Yeah.
So you have to learn a different way. So he's, if I'm understanding correctly, so it's sensory deprivation. So you're like, you have to be 100% going with the Force to be able to know what's going on outside of the helmet.
Yeah.
And the Jedi are not that, because they've got their eyes and their ears and they have all their senses. They're relying on that. That explanation right there makes complete sense to me, based on what they were, and what he said in the show.
Yeah, and the key there is that the Jedi train with the sensory deprivation helmet, but when they go into battle, they're not doing that. They've got, they don't have the helmets on, right? So it's like another level of commitment to the bit in a way.
I guess it would have been also interesting to see some kind of measurable difference, because as far as I remember, once his helmet is cracked and falls off of him in the battle, he doesn't like lose any power, Like, if he's quote unquote better with it on because he's fully reliant on the Force, and then it comes off and he's still like immediately kills Jecki and then fights Soul without any problem. I don't know.
Is it like,
it's like it's like he's saying it's better with it on and it makes you stronger, but then take it off and he's just as strong. So,
or is it like
Well-
weighted training? You know what I mean? Like, is it the other way around?
Ooh,
that
no,
it's
that's
handicapping him. Well, I would be fine with that too. It's just there was no measurable change. If there was a change, either good or bad, that would be what I would be looking for. But with no change at all, I'm like, why did you wear the helmet?
They set it up too that like she's gonna, and this might happen next season, RIP, where she makes her own helmet, and that's where we learn how all this stuff works, because that's what they set it up. There's a fissure of it in the cave, and I was like, oh, she's gonna make her own helmet, and they're gonna be, young, sexy Sith Lords together with their cool skull helmets or whatever. And that just doesn't happen, because that would have been where you explained
And because we're talking about it, the helmet actually like really, really angered me.
Okay,
because
say more.
I was positive, absolutely positive, that this bad guy was the mom who did not actually die. She just got, run through and then survived it in some fashion. And that's why she was wearing the helmet, because she would have been recognized by the Jedi she was trying to go after. So the only reason for Gamir to be wearing that helmet was so that the audience would not recognize him. I mean, yeah, there's the thing with Venestra, but why would he care if she knew that he was alive? It's never really explained. So it's much more about they wanted the audience to have the gotcha moment of, oh, it was this goofy character we introduced 2 episodes ago. That's the big bad guy, so that's why we gave him a helmet, so you wouldn't recognize him.
Yeah.
Also, I had a hard time divorcing his character. I had a hard time not seeing Jason Mendoza.
Not what? We lost you on the last bit.
I was gonna say I had a hard time. I had a hard time not seeing Jason Mendoza for this. Bortles.
I hadn't even thought about that. Okay, yeah. All right, sure. Do you
Like
think
when he was the goofy character, like I will say he did grow on me as the sexy Sith guy, but like when he was being his the quiet sort of wacky character, like all I saw was Jason Mendoza.
Yeah.
It kind of took me out of it. But then later on I was like okay, he's kind of like getting into this part, but like I'm still see Jason Mendoza.
Yeah, okay. I could see that. Do you think like that's interesting. There is a sort of who was I talking to about this? I was saying this the other day to somebody, but like there is a kind of rash of actors at the moment who they keep putting in stuff and they just look like that actor and they don't like do anything to make them feel like they're a character. It's weird.
So yeah, I was talking about this with somebody the other day. So there's like, you have the characters who are not the characters, but like the actors who like basically just go in and play themselves. Like George Clooney is playing George Clooney in most movies.
Yeah.
The Odyssey one in the South with God, what is that? Where they're escaped from prison. And there's the song.
Give me more than that. Come on.
Shawshank Redemption?
No, it's George Clooney. It's God, what is it? It's not No Country. All I can think of is No Country for Old Men. No, it's I Am a Man of Constant Sorrow. What movie is that?
What are you talking about? This always happens with you. Are you talking about A Brother Where Art Thou?
Yes, that's exactly what
Jesus
I'm talking
Christ.
about. Okay. So I'm saying like he's not playing himself in that movie, and he actually shows a bit of range there. But like most of the time, he's playing George Clooney, and then I think you have like other actors that It's like my favorite example of this is like Tom Hanks. Is like Tom Hanks, you could put him in any movie and like I immediately forget that I'm looking at Tom Hanks. He's whatever character. He's Captain Phillips. He's Sully. He's on Apollo 13. He's
Woody.
Captain Miller. He's Woody. He's whatever you throw him in, he's immediately that person. And I forget that it's Tom Hanks that I'm watching. Gary Oldman, same way.
Oh. Yeah, everything he's in.
I mean, like that's like next level.
Yeah, I always forget he's Jim Gordon, like, because you just see Jim Gordon, you don't see him. It's crazy.
I was watching Darkest Hour again the other day, and I was like, oh shit, that's Gary Oldman.
Yeah,
I forgot about that.
I forgot he was in Harry Potter entirely. Like he just disappears into roles.
Yeah.
The point I was making, the point we were making before that, I think, is that the issue with the helmet is that it both has not enough explanation and too much explanation, right? They either needed to back off a little bit and not explain it at all, or they needed a tiny bit more, even if it's like a hand gesture, wave away, this is how it works thing. Like they find themselves in the middle where it almost feels like there's a scene that was cut where we got a bit more detail that they cut for length or something, or pacing.
There was another complaint about the helmet that I saw. I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, but the title of the complaint was something to the effect of they introduced these bad guys or characters with helmets, and then almost immediately the helmet comes off. Like if you think
that was a complaint I made.
That happened.
I made that in our chat. I was bitching about that.
Was that? No, it was somebody else that made that complaint too. That I read.
Yeah. Well, I was complaining because it had the similar Kylo thing where it's like, don't take the helmet off straight away. It's scarier. That scene in The Force Awakens where he's stalking Rey through the forest, and all you hear is like the breathing through the mask apparatus and the lightsaber. It's so scary, and then it's like immediately, oh no, it's Adam Driver. Okay. Not scary anymore. Like I had the same feeling here where it's like, keep the helmet on for this fight. Have it be a big reveal at some point. You know? I don't know. I agree with that. As a complaint.
So, full circle. Raya, what did you think the point of the story was?
So, what I was getting at with that question, and I'm hopefully y'all will be able to suss it out for me, was that like, so in my thinking of what goes into and what makes a story, usually for a story I like to see some sort of transformational thing where a character, so structurally you think about like a character starts in one situation, and then they because of the events of the story they evolve and grow and become and transform into a different situation. And it's if we're talking about character development and not growth, they are I think the word is like they metamorphosize. They become something new and different, as opposed to just getting better at what they were before. Would be the development that I'm talking, and the development, the transformation that I'm talking about. And you would be able to point to the different events of the story along the way to say how they got from A to B, or A to Z in this case.
Right.
Like a clear series of events. That would be the first thing. And the second thing is that the way that a transformational story should work, according to my understanding, is that there has to be, in order for the character or the protagonist to win the story, they have to transform first, and then they can win the story. So in this case, I take that to be Osha has to break bad and kill Soul, and make the lightsaber turn red, etc. But when that happened, like I think I told you, I made the mistake of falling asleep in the finale.
This happens frequently, by the way. This isn't like specific to the Acolyte.
Oh no, it's not specific to the Acolyte, but like generally, if a movie has me, I'm not gonna fall asleep during it. Like,
the one that the one that I always talk about is I was in the theater watching the second Avengers film, and I slept through the entire Hulk Iron Man fight because it was just loud and nothing was. I didn't really understand what was happening, and I was like, I was just gonna close my eyes, and then
and you missed nothing.
yeah, exactly, and like yeah, I understand what you're saying.
So yeah, so first of all, I don't see the series of events that leads from A to Z. I don't know where the letters between A to Z are in this. It's like it feels like stuff happened to the people, or that's the other thing, is that stuff happened to them. They didn't necessarily create the events that happened to them. That might be the other thing. I'd have to go back and watch it again really closely to get a better understanding of if my recollection is correct. But I was very confused about what happened. And what happened, why it happened, what people wanted to happen, and did it happen? Like my big thing is always like, the why do people do the things that they do, and what do they want? And I don't know in this show.
Yeah, that's my biggest issue with the setup and the things they pay off and the character changes is I know what May wants. I don't know what Osha wants at any given point. Like when we start the story, I don't know what she wants. When she does the parent trap, I don't know. I don't know why she wants to leave because I don't know what she wants other than she doesn't want to be in this situation. Like the fundamental drive behind Osha could have been like, I just want to make money and have a quiet life, and she has to realize that actually she has a greater destiny, and she has to contend with her past. But we don't get that. She doesn't. When Soul picks her up, she doesn't go like, leave me the fuck alone. I'm nobody now. Like, I don't mean anything to any of you. I'm not a fucking Jedi. Like, I'm just trying to have my little lot in the corner of the galaxy and work on my little machines. Or maybe like one day I want to like build my own spaceship or something and travel the galaxy. Like, have a dream that then has to change and be challenged. And then like, you know what I mean? Like, there's nothing there. The only person with real motivation is Soul, who wants to bring Osha back into the fold without her learning the truth.
Yeah.
And he's a compelling character for that reason, right? Where he kind of, through this entire show, he feels like he keeps making these mistakes that are like, you're like, Soul, like, brother, turn left instead of right this time. Like, he keeps making the wrong choices again and again and again in this sort of view of protecting Osha and hiding the truth at the same time, and like failing to realize that if he really wants to protect her, he has to be honest with her, right? Like, that works for me.
Well, there was one part in particular where you talk about him making the wrong choices, but where I felt he made a compelling argument for, I did the wrong thing for the right reason, in terms of like the cover up. Because I was thinking, I think he's right about this. Is that she's, well, first of all, I don't understand. I don't know. Like, how old is too old for to be a Jedi Padawan, or to like start Jedi training?
That's such a great question. It seems to change.
Yeah.
Constantly.
Like they're too old. It's like what 4-year-old is being ripped away from their parents? It's ridiculous. But like. No, where he's like, she, or no, that it wasn't because she was too old. Or I don't think it was because she was too old. It was because they wouldn't have taken her in because she would have been mourning from the loss of her family, or they would not have taken her in, and it was either that or because she was too old or something like that. And he was the only one who wanted to take her in. Or something. Yeah. I forget his reasoning, but he said like there's a reason I covered it up, and it's because if I hadn't, they wouldn't have taken you, and then you just would have been screwed. because you
Yeah.
wouldn't be a Jedi, and your whole family, we killed them, are bad.
Well, yeah, because Trinity's like, yo, don't tell we don't tell anyone about this. Like, we tell them that May set the fire that destroyed the temple. Like, if you tell them that you killed her mother, like, they won't take her. I think that was what, or like, no, it's that they won't let her be your Padawan. I think there is a reason provided.
Yeah. So they make the wrong choice for what the characters could perceive to be the right reasons. You know, like it's a plausible decision that they make there.
Mm. Yeah, I just think like in general, like they needed to do a pass up on Osha's character and just try and find that thing which drives her that could then be put in tension with the rest of the story. And I think part of the problem the show has, as like at a conceptual level, is because these two characters, we haven't said this yet, so it's worth saying. So May and Osha are manufactured children from the Force by the Witch Coven, but crucially, it's not that they're twins, it's that they are the same soul inhabiting two bodies, whatever we're to take of that, right? So there's this kind of supposition the story makes, which is they have to be similar enough and motivated in similar enough ways that when they do the parent trap, that Osha can be swayed to Kamir's point of view to an extent. Which means that she can't have a strong enough point of view in a different direction, because that would sort of conflict with this notion that they're the same soul, right? And that to me is where what you guys were saying earlier about like the Star Wars of it all, that's where I get a little bit like, this seems too much. Like, you guys needed to dial this back a little bit with the explanation here, because you kind of trap yourselves with your options of what you can do with these characters.
I have a question for Darth.
Are we moving on from the overall point?
Yeah, I think we've...
Sorry? I mean, do you have something on all that?
Yes.
Go.
One thing that I thought was really interesting was how you mentioned wanting the characters to have a drastic evolution between how they're first presented and how they're shown at the very end. And that was so interesting because that was literally a chapter that I read in Save the Cat today during my lunch break, was talking about how it should be the first thing that you present, like he called it like opening shot and closing shot or something like that, and like you want them to be inverses of each other. And that was very much what they did, where at the beginning of the show Osha was like a noble soul, and at the end of the show she was a tormented, gone to the dark side soul. And I just thought that was so interesting that it was exactly what you had just said, and I just read that this morning, so that was interesting. But then the other point of which we had said several times so far, that this didn't feel really well structured, and it's like they took the idea of, we want to have a prequel, we want to have, you know, XYZ things in it, but they just were looping together all of these things. They didn't have a quote-unquote point that they were trying to get across. And I think if you like really dive into what the main topics are, meaning the divergence, like they say that word more than like probably any other word in the whole thing, like that is super, super important. The twins being born without a father as a result of that divergence, introducing Plagueis, like the point of this was Anakin. We're just never going to get there because there was no second season.
Sorry,
like all of this was leading.
What? Hang on. Hold on. What? What do you mean? Hang on.
So Plagueis' whole thing.
About
Plagueis' whole thing was to use the Force to figure out how to create, to either prolong your own life or to create new life, or to like use the Force to transition your memories into someone else's body, something like that. Like Plagueis was a different Sith. He was like a scientist. He was like a researcher, and he was studying midichlorians specifically. All of this was in the Darth Plagueis novel, which was fantastic. So, like, there was at least the theory that either he or Palpatine used this research that they had done to create Anakin. But whether or not that's actual canon, I don't know, because that anyway. But having the divergence, having these two girls without the father, and then introducing Plagueis, like, all of that ties together to this is leading up to Anakin. So the point of this was leading up to something. Like, this didn't have a point. It was the beginning. So they didn't care about having an actual point to this story. It was just, we have to get these characters through their growth arcs so we can get to the point. And the point would be in season 2.
I hate that.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Did you,
David,
did you ever hear the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise?
I hear he was a great Sith Lord, but not a tale you'll hear from the Jedi. Here's the thing. I hate that this show was potentially about the Skywalkers somehow still. That sucks for me, right? Like, that's bad for me.
I also dislike that.
But yeah, I told you guys this in our group chat. I didn't clock him at all when he was on screen. I must have just missed it. But there is a single shot of this little goblin man in the cave peering out at one point, which implies that he's been there the whole time. So while Osha and Kamir were like flirting and there was the helmet and stuff, he was just like in the back room, I guess. Like, I don't, like, what was he up to back there? You know what I'm saying? Like, was he was on the iPad waiting, biding his time. I have questions about what they would have done with that, but yeah, I understand what you're saying, which is the point of it was they were setting this stuff up to then go and do something with it in relation to that Darth Plagueis stuff, right?
Yeah, because there's so much of this that was just obviously, like, obvious foreshadowing when Venestra pulls out her whip to attack a bug that's attacking her for no reason, because the only time that those things have attacked previously was when they saw light and they were attracted to the light. You know, that scene was only there to show us the whip, which was to only set up the fight that would happen in season 2. Just like showing Yoda at the very end had no point for this story. It was to set up what came next. With what we had talked about with Osha being transformed into the bad guy at the end, if you think about it, May was also transformed into the good guy because all of the bad was wiped out when her memory was wiped out. So she is now pure good, while Osha is now pure bad. So, like, all of this is setting up, like, ignore this story, start with season 2, and that's where the story starts. Mm-hmm. All of this was the setting up the chessboard.
This is kind of my point. So I think that's a really interesting point. I actually have no problem with stories that do that as long as the thing is still interesting to watch, right? The first season of The Expanse is purely groundwork for the rest of the show, but it's still compelling.
So and it's great.
And it's great because it's all character drama driven, but then, like, you realize as the aperture widens, oh my god, this is the political setup, right? Equally, you know, the first season of Mad Men is really just set up for the rest of it, but it works really well, right? I think perhaps the difference here is that the moment to moment never quite lands in the ways that we maybe would have wanted it to, or the groundwork is so eager to get to that next place that it doesn't dwell enough in the present. And I was saying this about the runtime, which I think is really telling, where the episodes where I wanted more time with, like, character conversations or character drama or setup or detail are like the 30-minute episodes. And the ones where I'm like, okay, move it along, they're like the 45-minute ones where nothing happens. Like, it's very it's weighted in very odd ways, just from a purely runtime perspective, that I think adds to that sense of what you were saying, Darth, which is like it's set up for what's to come.
Well, do you think that's a problem with having the different directors and all the different episodes and stuff? Because, like, I know, like, Leslie was in charge of everything, but, like, the episodes that she specifically directed felt like the worst of them. And I don't know if the different directors were the ones who were also writing each episode, or if they wrote more of the story, and that's why some of them just felt so bad and others felt so good.
Maybe. I mean, the writers are pretty consistent across yeah, or at least the credited writers. My feeling is it's probably less to do with Leslie Headland as the showrunner, and probably more to do with the decisions being made at a, not to like exsanguinate her for blame or anything like that, but it does feel occasionally like, oh, some of this is like corporate decision making a little bit. Of where we're cutting and how we're putting, like how we're structuring these episodes to make it into the number of episodes it is, and perhaps that's to do with how much money they spent on the show as well. Whether like,
have you read The Night Circus?
What?
Have you read The Night Circus?
Not recently, not for a long time.
But you have read,
Yeah.
but you have at some point.
Yeah.
I don't know why that just hit me, but that is the only time in my life I have ever heard the word exsanguinated. And you just naturally use it in a sentence.
Yeah, it's some me bullshit. I think I read that at uni, maybe. Yeah, good book. You gotta read more. You gotta read more Lovecraft. A lot of exsanguination in Lovecraft. Yeah, I guess to try and tie some of this together to some kind of a point about the story. I think that what it was setting up, I'm interested in the character setups, right? I'm interested in what we then see Osha do next. That I'm really interested in. I'm not particularly compelled in any way by this notion that it all ties into the Anakin stuff. That to me is like, that sucks. That's bad. But I find the setting really interesting. That it's, you know, this era before the Jedi, as you said, Darth, before they were corrupt. Or before they were able to be corrupted in this way. And I love that they come across as these gormless fucking like mall cops. Like, it works really well for me in that way, right? Like the conceit is really something that I think is compelling. But then because the story is racing to get to these outputs for the setup for what's to come next, and the moment to moment isn't dwelled on enough, it never feels like these characters are built out in ways that you would want them to, right? Where it really feels like the writers are like, look, this is Osha, this is what she's interested in. We never feel like we get enough time with these characters to get to that place, right? I don't think this show has a single scene like, you know, I mean, Andor has multiple scenes like this per episode, but I think about that scene where it's Dedra in her office with her intern, and they're sort of taking they're taking pizzos together to stay up late to work on these papers or whatever. And it's just this little character exchange that shows like, oh yeah, these people support each other. They have similar ambitions. Or the scene where Andor goes back, he comes back after the heist and he goes to visit Bix, right? And it's clear that like everything is different now between them. And it's all just character detail that you don't need. You could cut it and the story wouldn't be changed, but it's important for the story because dwelling on the moments lets us build out the texture of these characters and the worlds they inhabit, and it takes them very seriously. And this story at multiple times feels like those scenes are missing, or cut for time or something. Like, it's hard to say at a production level, but that is the feeling I get. And that's why so often the story feels like it's not grounded in those moments, because those moments aren't present. And when they are, they work pretty well, but they're pretty few and far between. That's my general feeling anyway, of like kind of why this fails to stick together completely.
I have kind of like an opposite question, because you were talking about like the dialogue and, you know, the good parts and the bad parts, and I'm curious about the very beginning, which is totally action, and that was the part that Rye could not make it through after like multiple attempts, and like it was literally just like walking up and then a fight scene, and I have been looking forward to like hearing an explanation of what was so bad that you were like, I can't watch this. Like, you know, like that kick, did the kick throw you off? Like what was it that annoyed you at the beginning so much?
What is my question?
Why?
Why? So I think where it goes wrong for me is right at the beginning, because she walks up and goes, attack me with all your might, and then like strikes a pose and they all laugh at her, which was great. But like, that's such a ridiculous statement. First of all, and second of all, Jedi don't do that. Now, maybe having seen it a number of times now and having thought about this a little bit more, like maybe she does that because she does, like, her impression of Jedi is not what Jedi espouse themselves to be. Is that, the Jedi, like they only fight for defense, like never an attack, right? She doesn't know that. Because her only experience with Jedi is Jedi like coming in and killing her mom, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, in hindsight, that might make more sense. But at the beginning, that was a ridiculous statement, and then I don't know. It really wasn't good. Like or at least the first times that I watched it, it like just could not hold my attention. There was something wrong there. And the only thing that I think was potentially good about the fight was how she actually gets Trinity, which is just to distract her, because the Jedi, the Jedi secret to their fighting, or like when a Jedi fights a Sith, or when Anakin and Obi-Wan are fighting each other like that, is you have this sort of the Jedi have this sort of what's the word I'm looking for? It's their not predilection. It's
predetermination.
Predetermination. Yeah. So like they haven't like they have a general idea of like what's about to happen just from like a feeling, which is the Force telling them what's about to happen. Which is why it's so difficult for when they're smacking swords together. It's because they know what they know what the other person's going to do. And so, like, that's the structure or the problem of the fight that they have to overcome when they're fighting each other like that. And so that's what somebody attacking a Jedi has to overcome as well. And so it's not until Trinity is completely distracted by saving the guy that she's able to land the killing blow.
Yeah, the Jedi is functionally a quarterback, right? Like, they see the whole play, and the only way to like get to them is you have to sack them, right? Like,
it's the blind side.
Yeah, you have to. It's the blind side, right? It's the sack the QB. That's the only way to do it. I think that to expand on what you were saying there, I had a similar issue with the start of the show, and I think it's because it doesn't build the tension in sufficiently interesting ways for the fighting to begin. You could imagine, and I hate to keep referencing Andor, but it's just on the top of my mind because we brought it up already. You think about the way Andor starts. He walks into that bar. He's asking about his sister and trying to track her down. And these fucking dork mall cops are annoyed because the girls are talking to him, and it's Diego Luna, and he's incredibly charismatic. They don't know why he's there, and they keep pestering him. And as he goes to leave, the tension has been ratcheted up the entire scene because we can feel that something is about to happen. Like, there's like a tension in the air. Because everyone in the scene is treating it very seriously. And when he goes outside, and he's trying to leave, and they draw down on him, and he kills them, it's the most oh shit moment, where you're like, because the story builds up the tension, and because you understand immediately why, you don't know why his sister's missing, but you know why he's in that bar, and why it's a problem, and why this tension is building, and why these cops feel insecure, and why this happens. And then the second it happens, you're like, fuck, this is a problem. Like, this is going to be a problem for Andor, that he's killed these two more cops, right? And I think contrasted with the way this opens, you get the fight with all your might, and that is funny, but we need more time before the fight starts with this figure and with Trinity to build up that tension in some way, and not necessarily directly in conversation, right? But you can imagine maybe we follow Trinity through the streets. Maybe she's using small abuses of her power to do certain things, and then you have the shadowy figure following her. Show us some more texture of like why this exchange is about to go down the way it is, or show us the tension ratcheting up as the masked figure puts into place different traps or different things she's doing to then spring on this Jedi, right? Like, it just needs more grit and texture, and like, it needs to feel more threatening that this thing is about to happen, instead of what it feels like, which is a cutscene in a video game before a boss fight.
Did you guys log one of the reasons that you like the opposite effect, like whatever would not give you tension? So when she walks up, like the ship lands, and then she like walks up and she asks someone that's like a beggar or something that's laying down there, and she asks like, where can I find Trinity or something like that, and he tells her, and then she gives him a coin, and then she walks away. So we have, in any other story, the bad guy would threaten the person for information and then probably just kill them anyway, because that establishes the tension that you're talking about. But here, we have her do a good guy thing of asking and then rewarding for getting the information. So it immediately sets her up as a totally untension type villain. So that like ties like directly into what you're saying.
Yeah.
And she does that again later on. I have been curious to like analyze that and figure out what they were trying to do, because when when she breaks into the temple to kill the floating dude, she pays a kid to go do the thing instead of doing the bad guy thing where she would threaten or, you know, and then kill them afterwards so there's no witness. But she doesn't do that. She pays the kid and then lets the kid go. Like, they build her up to be a bad guy that isn't a bad guy, but then they wipe her brain so it's not her choice to no longer be the bad guy.
See, that would have been really interesting. Like, if she was properly over the hill, right? And, like, she's going around and she's killing all these civilians to get to these Jedi and shit. And that would make wiping her memory even more interesting for the next story they tell, right? And she's like, well, I'm not the person that did these things anymore. You know, how do I feel about that? What type of way do I feel about that?
Well, that you reminded me of two things. One of the on that point, it's the I think it's the opposite of the problem that Captain Marvel has, is that she regains her memory, and it was like, oh, I was a good person before. I'm a good person. I'm a good person now, but I was a good person before too. Yeah. And it's less interesting than like Jason Bourne, who, you know, wakes up and doesn't want to be is not naturally a bad guy, and figures out over the course of the story that he was a bad guy. So that could have been a very interesting season 2 with May. But what I was going to say is I think you really nailed it with the tension thing on why this doesn't work for me, because do you remember that was my issue at the beginning of Solo 4 years ago when we were talking about that, how we come into that story on an immediate high point and then it just drops out right at the beginning. And that was, I think, why that, and I remember at that time I said, like, I struggled with getting to the beginning of Solo as well. That's probably the same reason, is they don't do the tension right.
Yeah, and if you were going to sort of rejig that, you would have Han Solo, you would open with a really protracted, threatening, tense, like, war story set on whatever the planet is that they're sort of in the trenches of or whatever. And you use that as the leverage, and you know, he's about to go over the top of the trench, and he's got the locket with Kira in it or something like that. And, you know, there are ways that you can kind of rework that to do those things. And I think the show has all the component parts to figure that out. But this is where I think the genre of the story runs into some issues with the structure of the story and what it's trying to do, which is that I think at the end of the day, like, this is trying to be, to an extent, a YA fantasy story, right? To be contemporary with the kind of YA boom that we've seen as a result of Book Talk, you know, as an example, as a sort of a cultural phenomenon, your Laura Roberts and things like that, all cribbing, of course, off the back of Brandon Sanderson's Final Empire, and this kind of genre of YA where it's okay for these young people to kill people and to use these magical powers to kill people and things like that. It's playing in the same space, but it feels like, as Darth was pointing out, they don't they don't have her be bad enough for it to land in the ways that genre can now land. It like it's chill to kill stormtroopers, right? Everyone is fine with killing stormtroopers, but give me a bad guy who's willing to like ace, a person experiencing homelessness, or a friendly shopkeeper, or a good person. Like, that's more compelling to me, would build that tension. Or if it just struggles to land that first setup for both May and her actions, and then for, as we said already, for Osha and her motivations, right? And I think the combination of those make that start a really slow thing to become it. It takes a long time to find the thing it's doing, and wanting to be.
I'm also curious about what the genre of like how much the kung fu aspect like played into the writing, because there were several times in there where I felt like what I was seeing made sense to me because I was viewing it through the lens of a kung fu movie. And like that bit of dialogue that she starts off with that Rai hated, like that was like a perfect example. Like if you picture like a kung fu film, and the bad guy walks into the bar and walks up to the good guy and he goes "Sigo dong kui jiao," and in the subtitles you see "Fight me with all your might." That makes sense. That's exactly what would happen, So when she did that, it just kind of hit naturally to me, because from the commercials and seeing what type of fighting they did and everything. And so then, were they going for something that was goofy to mimic what we see that's goofy to Americans, from, these Asian films? Like, was that intentional to, you know what I'm saying?
Well, so my read on that was like that had something to do with her tasks as an acolyte or whatever, because like one of the things, she had like a checklist, and one of the things was to kill a Jedi without using a weapon.
That's
without a weapon.
Without using a weapon. That's the final goal.
Which is what Osha does.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like so it felt like to after we got that sort of revelation that like she had this like checklist and she had to kill somebody without using a weapon, and I was like, oh, okay, maybe that's just part of the thing, is you have to do it that way, is she has to go up and go fight me with all your might.
But again, there are ways that you could set that up that could be really, really tense, or it's like she has to pick the exact right moment, right? She has to pick the right moment in the right location, and she's following this person. She goes to do it, and then she backs off because there's, you can see it in your head. It's a fucking movie in my head. You've got her trailing this Jedi, and she sort of, she has the blades out, and then she's about to go do it, and then another Jedi turns up, and she backs off, and you could build that up, and then finally,
Or Trinity kind of gets a feeling that there's something happening, but she turns, but then she doesn't see anything.
Yeah, But to your point, Darth, I think there is definitely a genre convention that is exactly right, where it's like, you step out of the darkness and it's like, fight me or whatever. I've seen The Matrix, I understand. But whether that's naturalized or not, I don't think necessarily would have to impact the tension in building up to that moment. It's the build up to the moment that's the issue, not the moment itself. For me, if that makes sense.
And then even in the choreography of the fight scene itself also doesn't lend itself to the story really well, because there's a lot in there where she's kind of like Jackie Chan-esque, where she's like barely surviving. You see like a look of panic on her face when the like table gets kicked at her and she like barely jumps over it, or something like that. Like it's like she doesn't have enough of an upper hand to make to give that extra tension that you were talking about. Like the fight doesn't have the tension because Trinity is like in charge of it the entire time. So it's much less of a threatening fight and much more of will Trinity figure out this mystery of who this person is.
Right.
Which is like not really the point of a fight scene, I guess. So it just hits really weird.
It can be I guess it could be if the payoff to the fight scene was like, she can't outfight her, but she can outsmart her, which is in theory how it shakes out. But there's no preparation. It's like a spur of the moment decision that that May makes to distract the QB to get the blind side. There's no actual like. It's not like, yes, and now I have sprung my clever trap that the Jedi would have never seen coming, because you can outfight me, but look at my clever Sith ways.
She didn't chess game her into that position.
Yeah, she just happened to be on the ropes and go for something at the last second. You know, like it's desperation instead of deception. I don't know.
But in a way, does that not say something about the character?
It does, but again, my issue is not the
maybe not intentionally.
Yeah, maybe not intentionally. My issue is not the scene itself, right? Like I'm fine with that decision, but it's the build up to the fight scene and the payoff of the fight scene don't have a relationship that says something about the character. The fact that she walks into the bar, she pays the person, tell me where to find him, walks into the bar and says, fight me. And then the payoff of the fight scene is that she wasn't prepared for the fight fully and in a desperate attempt manages to kill the Jedi, with this distraction maneuver. That doesn't tell me a lot about May except the content we saw on screen, which is that she walked into the bar and was unprepared and got away at the last minute. Managed to get the thing at the last minute to kill the Jedi. If there had been tension building up to it with some preparation in some way, and the extent and the success of that preparation then could have led to the desperation. It's like, her planning was actually not as good as she thought it was. She actually doesn't have the juice like that she thought she did. And at the last minute, she managed to pull it off anyway. But we don't... Yeah, or what Darth was saying before, if she'd killed the person instead of paying them, that tells us something in relation to the payoff, which is that she's brutal and will do anything to get what she wants. That would say something in conversation with the desperate finale of the fight. But, they're just not... There's no relationship between all those things.
I think if she had done that first, then there is much more gravitas or threat in her fight me with all your might or whatever. Because without doing that and without getting your bad guy bona fides, it's like it lacks weight, and it's just funny. That's
what I was about to say. Is that there's no stakes in this fight, and it's hilarious that the beginning of Save the Cat was the title was from that you have to have your hero climb up in a tree to save a trapped kitten, because that's when the audience will start to care about the hero. And you don't have the Save the Cat moment with Trinity, so there is no threat for the audience if she dies, because we don't have any connection with this character. We needed to see her do something noble so that we see that she is a hero. What if she's the bad guy?
Well, that's what I was saying.
May is the good.
Yeah, you could do one. It has to be one or the other, though, right? I was saying that before. You could have Trinity going around abusing her power or something, in some capacity, or you have to do the opposite, which is we either have to want her to die or we have to want her to live, and we have to have a reason for one or the other, right?
And her being a Jedi is not a strong enough reason for that.
Doesn't seem like it, because otherwise you would have watched the dang show, wouldn't you?
Well, it's true, but my counter to that, to the Save the Cat part, would be because she's a Jedi. That immediately, if your audience knows anything about Star Wars, that immediately puts her on Team Good, right?
It's 100 years before, though. We've never seen this. This era could be bad Jedi.
No,
I don't know.
No, Ryan's 100% right. I'm not having this.
I know.
He said Jedi are good coded. Jedi are hero coded.
Yeah, they are on Team Good. So, so I don't. I think that is enough for us to Plus, it's Trinity, first of all, because I was like, it's Trinity, it's Star Wars. I don't
they
want
also
her to die
specifically
the first
say
scene.
Master, so you know that, assuming that the title is the same, you know that she's one of the 12 or whatever. It's not just some random knight. This is one of the highest trained people that there is.
Yeah, I understand you're about to make a point, right? This is a very annoying grievance I have. Fucking shits me to tears that you have this opportunity to set this thing 100 years beforehand, and not have the Jedi work differently? Like, have different titles, have it evolve over time. Anyway, go on. It's just it annoys me when stories do this.
If you're gonna do that, I think you should go. First of all, I think they should have gone much further back and left that Plagueis stuff. Like I'm kind of with you on that. Because that ties back into the Skywalker stuff, and I wanted this to be its own thing.
Yeah.
You know. So I'm almost glad it was limited to one season. But what was I gonna say? I was gonna say I want to talk about the brief injection of politics that happened in the show.
God, it's like 3 scenes. Oh, it annoys me. Yeah. As the politics lover on this show, I want to first of all commend the show for having politics. And then second of all, criticize it for having it for 3 scenes. If you're going to have it, do it. If you're not, don't do it at all.
Yeah.
But
because they made it seem like it was a big deal. And then it was like, oh, it's not a big deal.
Yeah. So there's this B plot that I completely excised from the summary because it doesn't matter, which is the current head of the Jedi she's in this kind of political disagreement with the Chancellor of the Republic because the Republic feels that the Jedi have far too much autonomy and there's no... It's one of these great like bureaucratic things. There's no Jedi Oversight Committee. And what the Chancellor wants to do is gather the votes for a Jedi Oversight Committee in order to investigate what they're doing. And the way to do that is to find a moment where the Jedi look like they've done the wrong thing and exploit that to get the votes in the Senate in order to build this committee to have oversight of the Jedi. And this is presumably the first cracks in the independence of the Jedi that will lead to the corruption that is possible under, what's his face? Frogman. What's his name?
Yoda?
No, Sidious.
Oh. Frogman? Oh.
You know what? Now that I said Frogman, it's understandably you went for Yoda and not for Sidious. But yeah, that's like the setup of the politics. Does it do anything for you guys?
I thought it gave the green lady, what's her name?
Vanestra.
Is that Vanestra? Okay.
Yay! I got one.
Like Darth said, I was like, I didn't know we had to know the names.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The green lady, I thought it gave her the reasonable explanation of why she would do the things that she would do, is that she would want to keep all this on the DL as much as possible because she has this bureaucrat breathing down her neck. And then at the end, the twist, I thought it was a kind of a I would have liked for it to have been more, but as far as wrapping up this B plot, I would have called it more of like a D level plot. But like it to wrap that up by actually throwing Gyung under the bus and saying like, you know, this was his fault and he got all these Jedi killed and everything, and then he killed it. Did she say that he committed suicide?
Yeah, he took his own life out of grief of the mistakes that he'd made in the past.
Yeah. And so she throws him completely under the bus for everything. Yeah. And the bureaucrat's like, well, of course, now the Jedi should have all the freedom in the world or something. I forget exactly what he says, but it's kind of ridiculous.
Mm. Yeah.
The really sad part about that is that none of it makes sense because it's all leading up to, you know, what we already know, and it should have been the opposite. Like, this is 100 years before the government did not trust the Jedi. Fast forward 100 years, and everyone trusts the Jedi so much that when a war starts and everyone's planet is threatened, they're like, we want the Jedi to be the generals of the army. Like, nobody had a problem with that. The Jedi were the most revered people. But rewind 100 years and they weren't. So, because it wasn't just the one dude, it was like everyone at that table at the vote at the very end looked skeptical. Like everyone was suspicious of the Jedi. It wasn't just the one guy. He was just the one that, obviously had a chip on his shoulder. So
Yeah.
why would they introduce this idea that 100 years before the Jedi were seen as almost bad guys because they were so secluded or whatever? And then how do we get from that point?
How do they get a 100-year pass?
Right, but it doesn't take that long for like society to turn on institutions like that. Like 20 years ago, most people thought police were a good thing, right? Like the timelines on these things is a lot to do with the political moment. But I agree that they do nothing with the fact that it's the case, right? Like the fact that they're not trusted doesn't. I was making this point in our chat about the when they're trying to set up the sting operation to capture May in Kamir's shop. It's not like the locals interfere or stop them or boo them or make the investigation more difficult because no one trusts Jedi. Like, these politics have no material impact on the story or like the ability for these Jedi to do their job. You know?
And actually, if we kind of extrapolate what we think they would be doing in season 2 or maybe 3, you could probably see that all of this is building up towards Venestra getting kicked out and Yoda taking over as head of the Jedi, and that is what leads to this 100-year increase in the Jedi's perception in the public eye, is that Yoda is in charge, he reforms the Jedi, and he runs them differently so that they are more venerated once we get up to the modern era.
Yeah.
Man, if we had gotten to see a Machiavellian Yoda, that would have been amazing.
Let's fucking go. And he uses the like attachment thing to reframe the Jedi, and that's the downfall. You know, Padawans and Masters will no longer have these close relationships. They will not have attachment to each. You know, like all that shit. That could have been where it started. Yeah.
So what I was thinking was, as far as the only real impact for me that it had was like it making the explanation for what happened at the end like slightly more tragic, and then giving her reasons for wanting to keep it on the DL. But like, I don't think you need that for that to be there. Like, I see this, if you want to make an analogy, or is it analogy or corollary? I don't know. But like, to give you a different sort of idea, like just think about like the Catholic Church covering stuff up for hundreds of years. And then it coming to a head, and like just blows up on them in the worst way, which is what happens in like Revenge of the Sith, you know.
Yeah, or you do the alternative thing and you have a schism, like you have a schism present in the Jedi Order, right? In the same way that you have like Protestants and Catholics and stuff. Maybe in the story, instead of it being one Jedi Order, there's a schism that's happened, and the unification is what will bring them to the point later on that makes the corruption of the Order possible, right? Like,
see, in order to do that, I think you need to go much, much further back.
Which is what I want anyway.
Yeah, which is what I want too.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess we've been talking for a minute here. Are there any other big things people wanna talk through here, or we sort of have we sort of run through the Acolyte?
I'm trying to. There was something. I think there was something else that I wanted to talk about, but like going back, I don't know that y'all were able to answer my question of like what Darth said about like Save the Cat, where you have a very clear beginning shot and you have a very clear end shot, and they are not the same person in those shots, which is what you get from a transformational story.
Yep.
But my problem is the in between didn't make sense to me to get from the beginning shot to the end shot.
Well, I think that's because the first shot isn't sufficiently detailed enough.
Probably, but like, how and why does she become a bad person? Like to me, it just the revelation that Gyung was like that killed her mom like wasn't enough. It wasn't to me.
What is Sol's first name?
I call him Gyung because that's his name from
Squid Game.
Squid Game.
Yeah. In my head, he's just Sol.
Okay.
I don't know that we get his first name. It doesn't seem like we do. That's kind of wild. He's just Sol. He doesn't get a first name. Do with that what you will. So, yeah, I think it's a combination of we don't get enough detail on the first image that the middle feels like we understand why the changes are happening. And even though they look very different, it doesn't feel like a journey happened. That's my general, like, high level why I think that doesn't work, to be honest. Because there's no strong motivation. I already said this, but like that initial framing and context of OSHA doesn't have enough motivation. Or you think about Luke, right? When we first meet him, he has this ambition. He wants to join the Imperial Navy, but really he just wants to like hang 10 with his friends and get the fuck out of Tatooine, right? Like he's like, oh, there must be something more for me. Oh shit!
Like he's about to join the academy.
Yeah,
the Imperial Academy.
He's bought into the army's propaganda that the army's an adventure, right? OSHA, what does she want? I think that's my biggest difficulty with her is that because we don't have a firm, clear view of her starting point, it's difficult to then know how far she travels and why she ends up where she ends up.
It's really interesting how much of that mirrors Rey. That, like, we don't understand why she thinks or wants the things that she portrays that she wants. Like she was, like, Rey was terrified that she would become the queen on the throne and be the bad guy in charge of everything. Like, why would that scare you to be in charge of the entire galaxy? Like, you grew up with nothing on a scavenger planet, living in dirt, and you're scared at the idea of owning everything. That doesn't make sense. Like, Rey never had the strong why developed so the audience would understand what she wanted, and they made another main female character where you have the same exact problem.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It's definitely a problem Star Wars has. I think that we could all agree with that. You think about Sabine. It takes them like 3 or 4 seasons of television to figure out like her deal. Like, it takes 3 seasons for her to get an episode. Like, this is just Star Wars to a T. They just have a real problem with this in general. Yeah.
So I got one other thing that I could think of. And because there was an article about probably towards the end of the run of the show that somebody posted somewhere, and I started reading it and everything, and they started talking about gray Jedi. And
let's go.
No,
I love a gray Jedi. Let's go.
I will fight you. No, it says like so. Did I ever give you my thoughts on the gray Jedi?
Yeah, we've argued about this before.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but this this person was basically like, yeah, blah blah blah, and the gray Jedi, and like the force doesn't belong to like the Jedi and everything like that, and it's like this. To me, again, it showed a clear not understanding of the force, and like, quote unquote, who owns it and how you use it and how you access it and things like that. But did you get the impression that Kumir was like going towards a gray Jedi? Because he didn't seem like inherently evil to me.
No, it was distinctly Sith. That whole speech was that, like, he literally said the Jedi don't allow us to exist. And you have to decree that we can't use the Force the way that we want to. It was very much, I want to be Sith and the Jedi won't let me.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, it's really funny you brought that up, because that was literally my last point as well. Because that is something else that it feels like the writers put in because it sounded Star Wars. It sounded like something that they had read before, but it doesn't track like long term. Like, the Sith were the ones who said, there's only going to be two of us now. Because when there's too many of us, we infight and everything gets ruined. The Jedi didn't say this can't happen. The Sith said it can't happen. The Jedi aren't stopping you from getting 1,000 apprentices. Like, that's your mantra that you live by, is to only have two of you.
But this is where I have difficulty, right? Because he's allowed to be wrong about this because he's trying to manipulate her in this moment. So there's no reason for him to be honest when he's giving this speech, because he's trying to manipulate Osha. Right? Like, it's also...
I would accept that in a book, because you get inside their head in the book. I would totally be fine with that. But in the movie, it's too much to infer what he's thinking, whether he's lying or not.
You and I fundamentally disagree about like this aspect of stories, so because we'll be here for hours. But the other aspect, I just want to say this because I haven't said it yet, is the first piece of Star Wars content on film with actual sexual tension. And I'm so glad it exists. It's finally happened. Finally, the flirting and sexual tension is real, and I'm glad it's here. And it's great. And I'm so thankful that it's not Obi-Wan and Sabine yelling at each other, or Anakin and Padme being toxic to each other, but just normal sexual tension. Just wanted to say that. Thank you, Star Wars.
Wait, you didn't get any of that in The Last Jedi?
No.
They touched fingertips, David.
There's a whole like subset of the community that the Raylos, man.
Yeah, but those two actors have no chemistry. Whereas the leads in this definitely do. And that scene where, and I'll say this, Star Wars they put a butt in it, but those cowards wouldn't hang dong. That's just disappointing.
We're not there yet.
We're not there yet. One day Star Wars will hang dong. But it was I like seeing a buff man in the water. I like he gets in there and he's swimming and he's coming out. And she's just looking at him holding his lightsaber, and it's like, yeah, I understand how metaphors work. I get it. I understand. That was when I was like, and that was the thing I was missing from the YA setup from the story until that moment, was like the romance aspect. Because YA largely has, especially female-driven YA, usually has a romance plot as the B plot. And it's almost always enemies to lovers or whatever. And so I was glad to see that there as well. But yeah.
Yeah, I completely missed the whole YA aspect of it.
Yeah, I think,
maybe that's why I didn't like it.
Yeah, I think they also just didn't market it properly. It was very weird. If they were like, hey, we're doing a YA story, TikTok would have fucking lost their mind. Gen Z would have been all over this shit. They were like, we're doing a YA romance thing. It's going to be just like Lauren Roberts. You're going to fucking love it. You're going to ship these people that hate each other. They're going to be evil lovers together. You're going to fucking love it. They would have done bonds and numbers. But yeah, it was very weird that they didn't sell it like that.
They could have leaned into it a lot more if they were going that direction. Like have like Osha is constantly hearing his voice like throughout it. Like every time she has a dream, she's not dreaming of May, she's dreaming of him and hearing his voice. They could have set it up a lot more than they did to really lean into the love aspect. Because it to me felt like it came out of nowhere, and I really, even at the end, I was almost like, are you actually holding hands as romantic, or is this just there's water, don't fall in? Or I mean,
oh, my friend, it was very sexual. He's holding his lightsaber.
Water, don't fall in. I love that. That's great.
He's holding his lightsaber, and he puts his hand on her hand on the lightsaber. I understand metaphors. That's what I was saying at the start, which is like this show is neither fully YA nor is it something else. Like it's in between all of these things that it can never be one thing. And then by the time it becomes YA, it's kind of the end of the show. Like they've got like 2 episodes left. It's very weird. But yes, I would have loved it to be way more YA and like you say, more obvious about the romance. But I thought it was pretty.
And I feel like that's one thing that like that sits very much at the top of my head of why Andor was so good, because it was it was that. Like they had their vision and they knew what their vision was, and they, you know, stuck to that vision throughout the entire thing. Whereas with like Acolyte, it's like they didn't have their proper elevator pitch, and they didn't like fully flesh it out, as they talk about in chapter 4 of Save the Cat. But anyway, I'm very much enjoying that book. You know,
or they
you should
did
go pick up a copy.
Or they did at the high level, like you were saying before, right, Darth? Like they had a really clear vision of like where this is all going, but they hadn't figured out the very clear vision for like this season yet, or like they had, you know what I mean? Like they might have been like, well, it's the 3-season arc is going to be this, but they hadn't got to this. The specifics don't feel like they're nailed down enough in this season.
Well, to different people, like if you're a big picture person, like at work we have 2 owners. One of them is like, we're getting from point A to point B, and it doesn't matter how. He doesn't need to think about how. He just knows that it's point A and point B. And then the other owner is like, I'm going to micromanage every, 20 little steps in between point A and point B. And point A and point B don't matter nearly as much as the steps you take to get there, to make sure you get there in the right way. And so I could very much see that like the writers of this were big picture. I don't care how we get from there to there. And if you don't do that carefully enough, then you wind up where we're like, how did this happen? It doesn't feel right.
Yeah. I think that's a good summary of the big stuff we've been trying to poke at here, which is like, it just ends up not feeling right. And it's all of these component parts not being in harmony together and not achieving the thing that it's clearly trying to achieve at different moments, right? But because at different moments it's trying to achieve such drastically different things, none of it unifies into this cohesive, dramatic, exciting thing. It's moments of drama and excitement mixed in with all this other stuff that you try and figure out, well, what's this all doing? And it just feels like it, by the end of it, it feels like it lacks a certain focus that would be required for this story to prosecute on the ideas it has in interesting and dynamic kind of ways. And instead it just, sometimes certain scenes feel flat, and others, like, you're like, oh, this is actually really doing something for me. Or certain fight scenes where you're like, oh wow, like they're really doing it. Yeah, I think that's probably like a good summary.
It's really an odd thought that I'm like, I kind of wish they had not done such a good job with those fight scenes and with a few bits in here, because then this would be very forgettable and I wouldn't want to go back and watch it. Like with the Kenobi show, like if Ewan had not done such a good job with his acting of this broken character, like that's why I want to watch it again, is for his character, and otherwise it would be mostly forgettable. So
yeah,
start getting it all right, or don't get the little bits right. Give us something terrible so we don't ever have to watch it again.
Get it completely wrong.
Yeah, really fuck it up. Before we get out of here, I just want to say that I've really turned a corner on Obi-Wan Kenobi as a show. I really don't like it. I was pretty like just trying to be even-handed when we first covered it. Man, I've turned a corner on that fucking show, man. Really rubs me up the wrong way. Like I like the idea of Obi-Wan being sad in the desert, but the stuff with Anakin, oh, it rubs me the wrong way. Anyway, just a conversation for another day.
I was talking to somebody about my favorite scene in that show the other day, where it was like when they run into Ice Cube's son, Ice Cube's son, and he's like, they're like, we really need your help, and he's like, there's no way I can help you, I'm too busy. And those guys are evil. All right, I'll help you. And all of that, that's a monologue. It's not even a conversation. They don't have to, he convinces himself. Yeah. It's so stupid.
Yeah. And it just really undercuts the, in A New Hope. And I understand that, like, stories don't work this way, but it has started to rub me the wrong way, that it's like, oh, so they actually had this confrontation, like, a couple weeks after he became Darth Vader, and then all these years later they have the second confrontation, but they act like it's the first time they've seen each other since he became Darth. Anyway, whatever. This is a fucking complaint for another day. We should wrap it up here because I need to eat something. any closing thoughts on the Acolyte? Any sort of any takeaways for us here?
I've got another,
wish
like,
it would have been better.
Yeah.
I wish it would have been better. I am pleased. I'm not pleased is the wrong word, but I think it was very definitive how quickly they came out and were like there's not going to be a season 2. And I think that like, yeah, again, pleased is the wrong word, but I think it gave me a bit of hope that they reacted that way so quickly to the reception of the show, or lack thereof.
Okay. Yeah. You just like that they made a decision straight away.
Well, not only that, but like maybe like they will look. They maybe hopefully they will take a look at like what transpired with this and go, let's not do something like that again. And I don't just mean on the content of the show or any sort of woke initiative or whatever. Like, we actually didn't manage to talk about that, which was good, because that was one of the things I was going to say is that like the first impression as I got of this show was like all the woke complaints were very true. And then after that, after watching it again, I didn't really get that. I thought all that was way overblown.
I thought that was bizarre. Like, this show has almost no politics in it at all. Like, I rarely understand those complaints, because you guys obviously understand my feelings about, like, you know, the political project that serves and why that term was invented and what people think it means versus what, you know, the fact that it isn't real. But like, I don't like, usually I'm like, oh, I understand how they're trying to manipulate this text to say these things. I don't even get it. Like, she wants to fuck the sexy Sith guy. Like,
no, I'm more talking about like I heard, because we all heard about the lesbian space witches, and then I was like, they're not really lesbian space witches.
oh, was that what
They're space witches.
I mean, they are.
Well, two of them.
They are a couple,
but
yeah. But like, also, who gives a shit? There are gay people everywhere. What are you talking about?
But are they even gay?
Yeah, pretty definitively. I think yeah.
Are they though?
I'm pretty.
Or did they just raise these kids together?
They're a couple for sure. For sure. Yeah.
It was two ladies that lived down the street.
They're definitely a couple. I was dating by this. In my head canon, they're a couple.
Right. Yeah, but anyway, like, yeah, like all of the stuff that I read and heard about, like how woke and whatever it was, I didn't get that when I actually watched the show. But yeah, no, what I mean, yeah, I hope that they learn some lessons from this. I hope that they stop spending tons and tons of money with nothing really to show for it. Like, it did not feel like $180 million show.
No. At least if you're gonna spend that money, spend it on Andor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the lesson to take away from this.
That's the lesson. Let Tony Gilroy cook, please. Okay, we should leave it there because we've been going for a minute. Darth, good luck with the computer. I hope that it doesn't explode on you.
Yeah.
You know. Anyone got any pluggables they want to? You know, I mean, I guess people that watch this far, they know where to find everybody, obviously. But is there anything anyone's got coming up?
Probably my next one is finishing the. I've got 8 pages written on the Acolyte, which is a lot of stuff we haven't even mentioned. So, yeah, a lot more to talk about.
Tie-in Darth video essay upcoming. YouTube.com. Go to Darth, search for Darth, or the link wherever you're watching this will presumably be in front of your face. Let's leave it there. You all know how to find me, ZeroIndent.com, underink.press. You know, for me, I just want to leave y'all with the question, have you heard the story of Darth Plagueis the Wise? You know, And I think we can all think about Darth Plagueis on our own time, and dwell on the fact that he was a Lord Goblin man in that cave. And that sort of really takes away some of that mystique for me. So it's good to think about.
What a low note. Tell a joke or something.
And on that great disappointment, it's time to end.
Yeah. Tell a joke. I got nothing.
Fade out.
Fade out. Good stuff. If you like these handcrafted studies of genre fiction, please head over to ZeroIndent.com or patreon.com/ZeroIndent if you'd like to consider supporting us. Even if you just give us a follow on Patreon, that helps us out. Leave a comment, a like, and if you're in a financial position to do so, you can support us and get access to early content, additional videos, director's commentaries, audio diaries, and all kinds of different things we have coming up. It really makes a difference helping keep independent media crit alive. Once again, that is ZeroIndent.com or patreon.com/ZeroIndent if you'd like to support us.